On November 28, 2006, the 25th anniversary of Joan's disappearance, Mr. Burke was quoted as his intentions of publishing a book in the Boston Herald. It was at that point in time that I really started to take a look at the case and really ask questions, because too much of Mr. Burke's theory just plain didn't make sense. He had no real connection between Mr. Paradiso and Joan, and now he's intending to put out a book implicating, a man in some very serious things. As I started to dig through all of this, news articles, and all of the things that I've come across in time, I have been absolutely amazed at things that I did not know. I truly was kept in the dark. I've been overwhelmed by some of the things and all the different directions that this case took. This next little piece that I'm going to talk about may seem like it's out of context, but it is right appropriately in the timeline where things took place, even though I didn't know anything about it. In April of 1982, the Websters, George and Eleanor Webster, had communication with a man by the name of Gareth Penn. This was a man in California who had studied and done a lot of research on the Zodiac murders. He had done some deciphering calculations, and I will point out that I've not done anything to, verify or check, the analysis that he's done. He did come up with a suspect, a man by the name of Michael Henry O'Hare, who was a Harvard professor, and Mr. Penn concluded that perhaps Mr. O'Hare was also responsible for Joan's murder. Where I've taken real interest in what he's done, and he did publish a book in 1987, the times 17, which does go through all of his calculations and deciphering and everything else, but it also has a great deal of his contact with George and Eleanor Webster, and certainly Joan's case. He digs into it quite a bit, and there's quite extensive communication. That's the part that interests me, Joan's case. I can verify most definitely and conclusively that indeed the Websters were in communication with this man. That first can be established by letters that were found in the Zodiac files released by the FBI regarding the Zodiac case through the Freedom of Information Act. Two letters that were indeed, even though names are redacted, after more than 25 years, I'm very familiar with George Webster's handwriting, and these indeed were written by George Webster. He confirms that indeed they were in communication with Mr. Penn and taking a look at information that he had. But it confirmed also that George Webster met with the FBI on April 16th, 1982. These are people that had the connections, they had the clout, they had the means, and even they had their own professional background themselves in the CIA to be able to sit down and command a meeting like that. They also met with, had another high-powered meeting on April 30th, 1982, which is confirmed in these letters. Two other things that establish Mr. Penn's credibility in regards to his communication with the Websters. Number one, he said that Eleanor Webster had discussed with him or told him about settling George's father's estate. Well, RN Webster did pass away on February 8th, 1982, and that is in the appropriate time, and there were some valuable paintings that were sold, which Mr. Penn accounts in his book. He also said that the Websters provided him with an aerial photograph, and that's kind of an unusual item to just pick out of thin air. That was not something that was reported in the media, but I was aware that aerial photographs had been taken or acquired at one point in time, and so I found that very credible that Mr. Penn has suggested that the Websters sent an aerial photograph to him. He also brought up something else. I found him very reliable in this regard in communicating with the Websters, so I found a lot of credibility in something else that he mentioned, but it's something that really confused me, for lack of a better term. He said that Eleanor Webster had provided him with an American Express authorization slip that came from Crimson Travel, which would be in Cambridge, and it was an authorization slip of Michael Henry O'Hare's. Mr. Penn used that to make a purchase along with other information he had that were things that were delivered to Mr. O'Hare's home. I'm not going to suggest that that was something he should or should not have done, but my question really arises in why Eleanor Webster, certainly she would have the background, I suppose, from the CIA to be able to acquire such an item, but why would she give it to a man out in California, someone she really doesn't know, someone who's putting forth a theory and a suspect? If they wanted to follow up a lead and they were looking at anything, no matter how far-fetched it might seem, why would they give it to this man? Why wouldn't they give it to the FBI or give it to the countless, legal agencies that were involved in this case by this time? It really is very baffling to me, and something that kind of confuses me as far as setting investigations and queries off in yet other directions. I mean, things were just going in all sorts of directions. But again, I had no knowledge of Mr. Penn, the Zodiac theory, none of this at the time. I also had no knowledge of the Iannuzzi case. Mr. Paradiso's name wasn't a name that I became familiar with until January of 1983, when Mr. Bond's statement was being put forward. I had absolutely no concept, even as a member of the immediate family, that there was anybody even being looked at as a suspect. That too, I was really left in the dark, finding and discovering these things and learning about the Iannuzzi case now versus what, information I was provided at the time of the trial, which certainly was very slanted by the media. It's been overwhelming. It really has. It's very confusing as to what all was going on here and how many different factors got into this story and confused the issue. Something that Mr. Penn, in his theory, when he's looking at Joan's case, he does calculations and he made use of triangles and geometry and came up with theorems trying to draw his conclusions. He used 3 points in Joan's case. He used the airport where Joan was last seen. He used the Saugus Marsh where her purse and wallet were found on December the 2nd, 1981. And he used the Greyhound bus station. Mr. Penn was left to believe, just like I was, that the Greyhound bus station in Boston was the location where Joan's bag was found. According to Mr. Burke, and Mr. Burke gives a very detailed account in his book with an explanation how the bag ended up in New York, and an article I was able to later go back and find leaves me believing that the bag was actually retrieved in New York. And I would say to Mr. Burke that there are many explanations, there are many possibilities of how a bag would end up in New York, not just the thing that he has offered, suggesting it was transferred there when it wasn't claimed. Mr. Burke has told so many other things that are not true or distorted that I have absolutely no reason to trust him on this account here. So where the bag was found is certainly an interesting point and concerning point for me, but certainly it would leave Mr. Penn in his book and his analysis with an incorrect point. And when you've got an incorrect point in making your calculations, you're going to come up with an incorrect answer. Once again, this was another tangent that took off in this case, tying this one now to the Zodiac.